Look around you. Notice how most people are not destroyed by physical harm or intellectual shortcomings, but by something more subtle and insidious: psychological fragility. This vulnerability lies at the core of human suffering in the modern world. People break down when faced with criticism. They freeze or collapse under pressure. Their choices, moods, and even identities are often dictated not by conscious intent, but by unacknowledged fears, buried insecurities, and desires they dare not admit. We live in a world that has made incredible advances in science, technology, and material wealth, yet human beings remain as mentally delicate as ever. They are constantly being destabilized, controlled, and emotionally hijacked through triggers they themselves do not understand. However, every once in a while, you meet someone different, someone who seems strangely immune to the psychological weapons that so easily disarm others. Criticism doesn't penetrate them. Manipulation fails. Social pressure has no noticeable impact. These individuals move through life with a balanced center, calm where others are disturbed, collected where others collapse. It's as if they possess a shield made of inner clarity, a kind of mental invulnerability that feels almost supernatural. But what is their secret? Were they simply born that way, with an unusually thick emotional skin? Are they just insensitive, detached from ordinary human struggles? Or is it possible they've tapped into a psychological truth so counterintuitive that it remains hidden from most people? Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung believed they had discovered something essential about the structure of the human psyche that could free anyone willing to confront it. He called this process shadow integration, and he believed it to be the most direct and effective path to psychological fortitude. Jung's exploration of the human unconscious revealed something startling: that the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, that we deny, repress, or pretend, don't exist. These parts don't disappear. Instead, they gather strength in the dark. They evolve into what he termed the shadow, the hidden side of our personality. And it is this shadow, unrecognized and unmanaged, that manipulates us from the depths of our own mind. The shadow, according to Jung, isn't just a collection of negative traits. It is not merely about anger, greed, or jealousy. It is a comprehensive counter-self, containing everything about us we've exiled from our conscious identity. So if you've spent your life constructing a persona of kindness, your shadow likely holds cruelty. If you pride yourself on being rational, your shadow hides deep irrationality. If you see yourself as morally upright, your shadow may be filled with disowned corruption. This doesn't mean you're a bad person, it means you're human. The psyche cannot tolerate contradiction, so it creates this division. As children, we learn very early which behaviors earn approval and which lead to rejection. We adapt. We accept some parts of ourselves and push others into the unconscious. This act is not pathological. It is necessary for the development of the ego. However, the danger arises when we begin to mistake this edited version of ourselves for the whole truth. The less aware we are of our shadow, the more control it has over us. Jung warned that the unconscious, if left unexamined, would rule our lives, and we would mistake its direction for fate. This is not metaphorical. It means that the shadow speaks through us in ways we don't realize. We find ourselves acting against our own best interests, repeating destructive patterns, reacting disproportionately to minor offenses, and projecting hidden qualities onto others. These are not coincidences. They are symptoms of an inner world left in darkness. People who are unaware of their shadow are filled with psychological pressure points, buttons others can push to evoke predictable reactions. and these reactions can be used against them. Call someone secretly insecure a coward and watch their panic. Question a self-righteous person's motives and observe their moral fury. These reactions don't arise from the present moment. They are eruptions from the unconscious. The terrifying truth is that anyone who can identify your shadow can manipulate you. They can destabilize your emotional state, derail your reasoning, and make you dance to the rhythms of your own denied self. This holds true regardless of how intelligent or educated you may be. Your mind can be your greatest asset or your most dangerous enemy, depending on how much of it you are willing to face. Jung believed projection was the primary tool by which the unconscious exerts its power. Everything in ourselves that we do not want to see, we unconsciously attribute to others. You may believe you're spotting arrogance in someone else, but so, you are often reacting to the arrogance you haven't accepted within yourself. You think you're dealing with another person's rudeness, when really you're responding to your own hidden aggression. Projection distorts perception and opens you to manipulation because you're no longer interacting with reality. You're fighting your own shadow dressed in someone else's clothing. This happens all the time. In arguments, you're triggered, not by what was actually said, but by what your unconscious made it mean. In relationships, your reactions are often colored by unresolved parts of yourself mirrored in your partner. In politics, you demonize your opponent not because of what they believe, but because of the disowned traits you've projected onto them. The shadow blinds us to truth and makes us pawns in our own psychological game. And this is why people with unintegrated shadows are so vulnerable to being controlled. The moment their projection is activated, they stop thinking clearly. Their emotions hijack their cognition. Their sense of self becomes unstable, all because they are wrestling with the unseen within them. But there is a way out. Jung taught that the path to mental strength does not lie in suppression or denial, but in radical self-awareness. The individual who integrates their shadow gains the ability to see projection in real time. They can distinguish between a real external threat and an internal echo of something unresolved. They don't get pulled into mental spirals or emotional overreactions. They face life as it is, not as their shadow makes it seem. This creates the first layer of psychological immunity. When your shadow is integrated, the weapons others use to control you lose their effectiveness. Insults are decoded rather than absorbed. Manipulations are observed rather than internalized. Instead of reacting, you choose your response, guided by clarity rather than wounded pride. There is a powerful paradox here. Jung realized that true strength comes not from pretending to be flawless, but from embracing your flaws completely. Only by owning your weaknesses can you become immune to them. He wrote that the acceptance of oneself is the essence of moral maturity. This is not about wallowing in guilt or shame. It is about looking at your darker sides without judgment. When you have admitted to yourself that you are capable of fear, you can no longer be ruled by the fear of seeming afraid. When you've owned your potential for cruelty, no one can shame you with the accusation of being unkind. You are no longer blackmailed by your own self-image. This is why the most psychologically resilient individuals often speak openly about their struggles and dark impulses. They are not displaying weakness. They are practicing mastery. When you have already acknowledged something within yourself, no one else can use it against you. Attempts to shame you fall flat. Attempts to make you insecure don't land. Attempts to control you through fear of losing your reputation or identity become useless. You are no longer governed by the fear of exposure because there is nothing hidden left to expose. Jung summed this up perfectly when he said that when the inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. What this means is that If you remain divided within yourself, life will continue to confront you with situations and people that reflect that division until you are forced to face it. But once you bring your shadow into the light, once you see and accept the full spectrum of who you are, you reclaim control. You become stable, not because you are invulnerable to hardship, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. The storm may still rage outside, but inside, you are calm. They have removed the fundamental mechanism by which external forces disturb and destabilize the average person's inner world. This is not a surface-level trick or a set of social tactics. It is the result of a deeper transformation, one that renders the psyche immune to manipulation, shame, fear, and emotional hijacking. Jung did not merely theorize this concept. He provided a clear pathway for attaining it. The process is known as shadow integration, and it represents a systematic journey toward becoming mentally untouchable. Jung's great insight was that human fragility is not rooted in weakness or lack of intelligence, but in the unconscious fragmentation of the self. The psyche is not born whole. It becomes whole through struggle, through confrontation with all that we deny, repress, and disown. That confrontation, when consciously undertaken, creates an equilibrium so stable that emotional weapons no longer penetrate it. What results is not the absence of emotion, but mastery over emotional response. It is not the rejection of fear or pain, but a reorientation in relationship to them. And this begins with recognition of the shadow. To integrate the shadow, we must first recognize its existence and contents. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a process of deep self-observation. Jung suggested several methods for beginning this work: dream analysis, active imagination, journaling, and, perhaps most revealingly, an honest examination of our emotional triggers. Everything that evokes a disproportionately strong emotional reaction reveals something hidden. Everything that irritates us about others, Jung wrote, can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That irritation, that outrage, that surge of judgment, they are not accidents. They are indicators, signals pointing toward the repressed material in our own unconscious. When something disturbs us deeply in another person, whether it's arrogance, dishonesty, cowardice, or cruelty, it often reflects a part of ourselves we have refused to face. The outrage we feel toward others is often a disguised form of self-rejection. The behaviors we most condemn externally are frequently the very traits we fear or hate within ourselves. Recognizing this does not mean we condone destructive behavior. It means we acknowledge our own capacity for it. The difference between saying, "That person is evil and I am good," and "that person has acted on impulses that also exist in me," is the difference between repression and integration. The former strengthens the shadow, the latter weakens its power. After recognition comes acceptance. This is the point where most people turn away. The idea of owning traits we find shameful or repugnant is terrifying. But Jung emphasized that psychic wholeness demands it. There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection, he wrote. Acceptance does not mean indulging destructive impulses. It means ceasing to treat them as alien intrusions. The shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a part of ourselves that has been exiled and must be reclaimed. This step involves what Jung called withdrawing projections, noticing when our harsh judgments of others are actually reflections of our own hidden traits. It's about ceasing the war with parts of ourselves we've long condemned and instead recognizing that they belong to us, whether we like it or not. This shift transforms our response to external challenges. Instead of feeling attacked when someone accuses us of being selfish, manipulative, or insecure, we reflect, is there truth in this? Not in a self-destructive way, but with open curiosity. What if the accusation touches something real? What if that recognition can lead to growth instead of defensiveness? This stance dissolves the unconscious hooks that others exploit. Manipulation fails when it has nothing to latch onto. Emotional attacks bounce off when the target within has already been seen and accepted. The final phase is integration. This is the transformation of shadow qualities into conscious strengths. Integration is not suppression, nor is it surrender. It is transformation. The anger you've disowned can become righteous courage. The selfishness you've buried can become self-respect. The chaotic imagination you've suppressed may become your source of genius. The goal is not to erase these traits, but to reframe and redirect them. The shadow becomes a source of energy, not destruction. Jung called the shadow a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. Integrating it requires seeing the dark aspects of ourselves as present and real. And once acknowledged, they can be transformed from unconscious saboteurs into conscious allies. Once the shadow has been integrated, the psyche becomes invulnerable to the typical forms of manipulation. When someone attempts to activate your shame or guilt, they find no foothold. When they try to provoke your insecurity, you do not react. When society demands compliance through fear of rejection, you are unmoved. Why? Because the fear they hope to exploit has already been faced. The traits they hope to weaponize have already been acknowledged. There are no secret traps in your psyche because you have already walked the corridors of your own darkness. This inner strength manifests in every domain of life. In personal relationships, you stop projecting your disowned traits onto others. You stop trying to mold partners into idealized images and start seeing them clearly. Conflicts no longer spiral out of control because your reactions are no longer unconscious. Criticism becomes a tool for self-awareness rather than a trigger. For defensiveness, emotional manipulation fails because the psychological buttons others try to push have been examined and disarmed. In professional environments, this translates into immunity to power games. The subtle attacks that might destabilize others have no effect. You do not react impulsively because you are not governed by hidden insecurities. You maintain composure under pressure, not because you are cold or emotionless, but because you are deeply grounded in self-awareness. The fear of rejection or failure, which keeps others in line, no longer holds sway. You operate from internal clarity rather than external approval. In the broader context of public discourse, shadow integration becomes a shield against ideological manipulation. Political rhetoric designed to inflame unconscious bias loses its grip. Outrage intended to hijack moral reasoning becomes an invitation to reflect more deeply. You remain intellectually clear even when others are consumed by emotional reactivity. You listen when others scream. You understand when others condemn. You remain centered when others lose balance. This is not because you lack feelings, but because you have brought your feelings into the light of consciousness. You do not suppress them. You've simply befriended them. To those who have not undergone this process, the integrated individual may seem almost supernatural. They maintain presence in the midst of chaos. They speak truth others are afraid to voice. They do not crumble under criticism. They do not lash out when challenged. They have completed what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the contraries within. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, Jung wrote, but by integration of the contraries. This is the key to the invulnerable psyche. Jung's shadow code offers a radical insight. Psychological invulnerability does not come from building higher walls, but from eliminating the need for walls. It is not armor that protects the integrated psyche, it is self-knowledge. When you know yourself completely, there is nothing to hide and therefore nothing to fear. Attacks reveal nothing new. Triggers fail to trigger. Manipulation slides off without effect. This is not philosophy, it is practice. And those who have walked this path often appear unshakable to those still caught in inner conflict. They are not special. They are not superhuman. They have simply done the work. They have faced the parts of themselves most people spend their lives running from. They have confronted shame, fear, selfishness, rage, envy, and despair. And instead of denying these, they have learned to hold them, to understand them, to integrate them. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the essence of true strength. The paradox of the shadow is that by embracing weakness, we become strong. By acknowledging darkness, we find light. By owning everything we are, we become free. The world cannot control what you have already made peace with. It cannot shame what you have already accepted. It cannot destabilize what you have already integrated. The shadow, once feared, becomes the foundation of a psyche that is whole, awake, and untouchable.